I'd first like to start by thanking the board here at Paramount Pictures for inviting us back to talk about this important issue once more. Specifically today, we're going to be focusing on the ethical implications of not having enough minority actors in our films and an inaccurate and overwhelming lack of representation in our films. Before we get into the meat of our presentation, we want to go ahead and define two terms that we'll be using. Specifically, the first being whitewashing, which is an unethical casting practice in which we've been hiring, and we and other production studios have been hiring white actors in order to play traditionally non-white character roles. Beyond this, we want to define what exactly defines a diverse film. According to the Creative Artists Agency, having a film which casts is at least 30% or more non-white qualifies it for being officially diverse. So when we refer to increasing film diversity and having diverse films, that 30% margin, that's the bar that we're aiming for. I'm going to turn it over to my partner.
Thank you. My name is Tashiwamu, and I'm an international advisor on the board for Paramount Pictures. For a long time, we have propagated an inaccurate and stereotypical representation of characters that hurt how many communities, both at home in the US and globally, are viewed. This trend is particularly concerning for us since we are an American company based in America, a nation that's been built off the backs of various different ethnicities. From the casting, from the inaccurate and stereotypical portrayal of a Japanese in 1964 in Breakfast at Tiffany's, to the casting of Angelina Jolie to play the role of an African woman, we have endured heavy economic losses by taking all these unethical decisions.
Beyond this, there's a bevy of research that shows that having a lack of representation or inaccurate representation in media, both film and television, ends up hurting viewers' self-esteem. A 2012 University of Michigan study points out that of children studied that ended up watching at least 2 hours of television, after watching, every single demographic reported on having lower self-esteem than when they began, the sole exception being young white boys. This is attributed to the fact that the overwhelming majority of protagonist and heroic roles in television and films in general are reserved for white males. The counter to this is the fact that minorities and women viewing these programs were not properly represented and felt excluded from being a heroic role or having a protagonistic role due to the overwhelming majority of the roles being for white men. Now, beyond this, this was a study from 2012, but we here at Paramount do not have the luxury of saying this is something we've only recently discovered. Research on these effects have been going back to the 1960s and 70s. Specifically, University of Pennsylvania professor George Gerbner in 1976 coined the phrase symbolic annihilation, arguing, quote, representation in the fictional world signifies social existence. Absence means symbolic annihilation. Now, this is a lot of sociological research that refers to society at large, but can we see this on the individual, personal level? We argue yes. If you turn to the writings of Black essayist and intellectual James Baldwin, he wrote in The Devil Finds Work, a collection of essays published in 1976 about Hollywood films and their portrayals of race relations. He says, he talks extensively about growing up in the 1930s and 40s and feeling excluded from society because of the fact that films that he loved to go see so often overwhelmingly were white and had very few, if any, African American actors in them, which made him feel excluded, like he and his people were not worthy of being represented in such a medium. He says, quote, heroes, as far as I could then see, were white, and not merely because of the movies, but because of the land in which I lived, of which movies were simply a reflection. Again, referring to the 1930s and 40s, this is not entirely inaccurate. Minorities were systemically and systematically kept from entering all sorts of parts of society. So the fact that the film industry followed suit wasn't necessarily a surprise. However, in the modern era, minorities can occupy any job that they wish if they're willing to strive as hard, including the office of the president. They still face difficulties, but they're far lesser than the 1930s and 40s. However, our film industry, us specifically, have not managed to keep up. The majority of our films are still overwhelmingly white. Now, there are a lot of ethical implications on this, and we want to focus on our role in the social contract. Not only the research that we brought up so far, but an overwhelming majority of research overall says that films and television have a major role to play in culture and how people view not only themselves, but other people. So with that level of power that we, Paramount, a major movie production studio, have to set the cultural dialogue, we have an implicit understanding to not abuse that power in our role in the social contract. Unfortunately, through these inaccurate and stereotypical portrayals, or lack thereof of portrayals of minority characters, we've abused this power consistently, not only in the US, but worldwide, as my partner will now explain.
Most of our education, at least for those who will not have the privilege to travel, will come more from television than it will come from experiences. Movies have the ability to impact and inform societies. They have the power to leave lasting impression on audiences about certain communities. One such example is how my perception of the US was before coming here to work with Paramount. On TV, I saw many white characters, whether it was late night TV, popular movies, or daytime show. For this reason, I thought that the US was mainly only white people lived in the US. Of course, that does not stand true because America is one of the most diverse countries in the world. And for this reason, Paramount, being an American company, has some sort of social responsibility to deliver to the changing demographics of the country, because we know that taking this route will garner us more economic gain in box office. One impact of having a homogeneous representation has also led to global repercussions. And I know this because as an international advisor on the board, I feel the need to bring light on this matter because this is something that I grew up with and is happening very much as I am talking right now. It has led to a global standard of beauty that is unattainable. And I've seen that in my country, in Bhutan, I've seen that in India, I've seen that in Thailand, and in many other states. Beauty that's naturally linked to whiteness. Growing up, some of the girls that I grew up with were forced into using skin whitening products, while those with darker skin were labeled black beauty. Some of my classmates suffered from low self-esteem. Why? Only because of their skin color. For this reason, as an American company, we have higher roles to play, and that is why we should take steps in the right ethical direction, because we know that taking this route will not only make better global impacts, but will also garner better economic results, at least in the long run.
We've laid out a bevy of problems currently facing not only Paramount, but Hollywood in general in terms of representation. And I now want to lay out some of the solutions we've come here to provide for Paramount that they can undertake in the immediate aftermath of representation. First off, we want to go ahead and start working to end whitewashing as a practice. It's consistently proving to be an economic failure and has always been an unethical practice overall. Beyond this, we want to work to increase diversity in our films overall. Again, reaching for that at least, on average, 30% non-white character role. Beyond this, we want to make sure that our minority characters are not stereotypical representations, and that we work to have minorities in starring roles that don't necessarily conform or are trapped within stereotypes about their minority roles in America. For instance, you can have an Asian American character play in the role of a starring action hero in, say, a James Bond film or a John Wick or a Die Hard film. You don't necessarily need to wait for a film about an Asian American culture or family to have an Asian American in a starring role. Beyond this, we want to make sure we hire more minority writers on our staff, because one of the major problems even in films with minority characters is the fact that the way they are written, since the majority of our writing staff is male and white, isn't necessarily an accurate representation of what a female or what a minority male's experience in America is like. It only represents what our white male writing staff believes that that experience is like. So by hiring more minorities in writing positions, we can more accurately represent the huge majority of our society that is coming to see our films. Thank you for your time.